Very good morning. I am Shilpa. Welcome you all to the NCERT live phone-in program. And our today's topic of discussion is the history of partition. And to discuss this further, in the studio we have Professor Pratyusha Kumar Mandal, who is designated as a professor and department head at International Relations Division in NCERT. I welcome you, Professor Mandal.
Thank you very much.
So let's proceed to understand our today's topic of discussion. But before we proceed, I would like to inform you all is that we have started a very special program, which is the Guidance for Students Exam Helpline, which we have created particularly for you people to deal with the exam stress, and that too particularly to a stress-free examination, how to deal with it. And if you have any further query or the question related to the exam, then you can dial into our toll-free number or can drop an email to us, or as a part of question with selfie, you can create a small video of less than 30 seconds and send us on our email ID. So today we are discussing on partition, history of partition. So how we are going to commence?
As you may recall, in our last two episodes, we have discussed about the rise of Indian nationalism, which was an essential introduction to understand the subsequent events which unfolded themselves until India achieved its independence.
And also
with with the rise of Indian nationalism, also we spoke about the Gandhian movements, particularly the non-cooperation movement, the civil disobedience movement, and the Quit India movement. These were important events in the process towards India's achievement of independence in August 1947. So now it is appropriate for us to discuss the events which particularly led to the partition of India and the subsequent achievement of independence, after discussing all the major Indian national movements. The partition phrase is particularly important because of two essential characteristics which we associate our country with. The first essential characteristic of India is its cradle of one of the earliest civilizations in the world, which continues till this date with the underlining ethos of unity and diversity. So this is perhaps the only civilization, as our students would like to remember all the time, which has an unbroken historical continuity. Though the other important characteristic is that we have always taken pride in our cultural diversity, which means that in this country, people following diverse creeds have always lived together. More than this, India was also ruled simultaneously by so many kings, which implies that India was politically following a principle of diversity. Despite this, there was never a political, I would like to use the word within quote, a political division of the people. Because people in this country could move from one place to another without any hindrance. So there were no such thing as a political bar for the people from moving from one place to another and finding livelihood, getting respect for their scholarship, and so on and so forth. So this partition assumes special historical significance in the context that for the first time in this thousands of years old history of our country, the people got divided the country got divided geographically,
Right.
and the people also got divided on the score of religion. So it's just appropriate for us to reflect as to how events led our country to be geographically vivisected, and also for the people to get divided,
Right.
the wounds of which have not yet been fully healed. So that's how this important historical event needs to be understood by us.
Right. So, as you just talked about the two aspects which led to the partition. So, can we say that one of the aspect is religious differences? It actually led to the partition?
Yes. For this we have to understand the process.
Right.
Where did it begin? Broadly speaking, the process begins with the rise of communalism,
Okay.
particularly in the context of politics in the early years of the 20th century.
Okay.
The students may recall that we have had a Swadeshi movement around 1905, and following this Swadeshi movement, it was natural for the British to feel alarmed, and subsequently two things happened. One, the communal fault lines became sharper.
Okay.
New political outfits were created in the name of religion,
Right.
or at least people's affiliation to particular religions. And the British, as ever eager they were, they wanted to perpetuate their divide and rule policy by exploiting this fault line. This is how the process of India's partition began in the early years of the 20th century. But the story of communalism is a different story, which we might deal in a separate episode.
Right. So, if you could just tell at the very starting point of the partition.
Historically speaking, we can locate the events which led to India's partition to around 1945.
Okay.
This year is quite significant. By the end of 1943, the Quit India movement had almost been put down. Most of the leaders of the Indian National Congress had been imprisoned. So there was no one who could convincingly lead people in a particular direction.
Okay.
Second of it was that Subhash Chandra Bose had escaped out of India. He had arrived in the East. The Indian National Army had already been established.
Right.
He took its leadership and announced openly that India would like to militarily free itself from the colonial yoke. And consequently, the pressure on the British started rising, because the Indian National Army started its military march towards India through the Myanmarese route. So it was at the time known as Burma. So the World War II had also come to an end by May 1945. So all these three significant events had caused the process to move quickly towards India's independence. So despite the desire of the British to stall the process of independence, they could not have done so. So this is how we can locate the beginning of the events leading towards India's independence to around 1945.
So interestingly, we are just unfolding the events and how it leads to the partition.
Yes.
So what happened next?
After the Quit India movement was suppressed, Lord Wavell came to India as the new Viceroy. After coming to India, the first priority for him was to break the deadlock. This deadlock had arisen between the Indian National Congress, which was the foremost political outfit at the time, which was leading India's movement towards independence,
Right.
and the British government, both in India as well as in Great Britain.
Right.
So therefore, the leaders who had been imprisoned, who belonged to the Congress Working Committee, were released so that a meaningful dialogue could begin between the British India government here and the Indian National Congress. So with this, Wavell broke the deadlock. Thereafter, he came with a plan which is now called the Wavell Plan. This plan was announced by him in the month of June in 1944. So the plan had a few important features. The first important feature was to set up an executive council of the Viceroy at the central level.
Right.
But earlier also, we had such a council at the central level. So what was the new thing that was envisaged by Wavell? Wavell said, in this new executive council, other than the Viceroy and also the Commander-in-Chief of the British Indian Army, everybody else would be an Indian. So that was quite a significant advancement towards giving Indians self-rule. So other than a few veto powers which were to be held by the Viceroy and also decisions to be taken on account of India's defense, because the Second World War had not yet come to an end, all other significant decisions could be taken by the Indians through this executive council. Besides, Wavell plan also envisaged working out an arrangement by which a permanent constitution for India's self-rule could be worked out. So these were two important propositions of the Wavell plan. In order to make his plan acceptable to the Indians, he also convened a conference wherein 21 leaders from different political outfits were represented. And this conference was convened in the summer capital of India at that time, which is Shimla, now the capital city of Himachal Pradesh. So there were people who represented the Indian National Congress, the Muslim League, the Sikh community, the scheduled caste community. So in a manner of speaking, everybody else, all kinds of political opinions were represented in this particular conference. However, the conference was sabotaged by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who represented the Muslim League. He had two major arguments. The first important argument which he wanted to put forth was that no Muslim could represent any other political opinion, because he said it is the Indian Muslim League which is the sole representative of the Muslim community in India. he was particularly annoyed because at the time the president of the Indian National Congress was Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. And as all students of Indian history know, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad was a person of great scholarship who staunchly stood for an united India. And because he was representing the Indian National Congress in the conference in the capacity of being the president of the Indian National Congress, Muhammad Ali Jinnah was finding it difficult to argue for a separate Muslim nation on the grounds of the Muslims and Hindus being two communities which had nothing in common. So the two-nation theory was under threat, and that's why he objected to this. The second demand, which Muhammad Ali Jinnah also wanted to press there, and which is very significant because of two things. First, that this became a kind of wedge in the discourse of India's independence struggle, which could not hereafter be ruled out. And second, the British also wanted to use it as a pretext to deny to Indians any other legitimate demand that might arise from its leadership and also from the popular movements in the subcontinent. And what was this demand? This demand was that not only that in the Executive Council, so constituted under the Wavell Plan, the Viceroy should have special veto powers that he could stall any proposal which might otherwise be passed by a majority in the Executive Council, but that he should also have the power to ask the Executive Council to pass any proposal with 2/3 majority that may be objected to by any Muslim member in that Executive Council. So these were two very important. One, that no other Muslim can represent any other political opinion in India. Muslim League is the sole spokesperson of the Muslim community in India. Two, this buttressed the two-nation theory which the Muslim League was advocating. Two, that if a Muslim member in the Executive Council objected to any proposal to be passed by the Executive Council, then it has only to be passed with 2/3 majority. And as we all know, in the legislative process, something which is only exceptional is to be passed by 2/3 majority. Most other issues which are of popular concern are passed and implemented with simple majority. So Muhammad Ali Jinnah sabotaged this.
So you just talked about the two-nation theory. So many students had a problem in understanding a term which is second-class Indian citizen in that. So if you could explain.
From these 2 points, let us try to understand this phenomenon. Now, India, as I pointed out in my introductory remarks, has been a country which is not alien to people practicing different religions living together. And in that, we have also seen how kings have ruled India with some kind of equanimity or by giving respect to people of all communities. We go back to a time when the subcontinent was ruled by Muslim kings. And they never discouraged people from practicing any religion which they ever wanted to profess. Though at certain times there were issues like jizya being imposed on the Hindus during this period, but that there was freedom to practice any religion had never been questioned in this country, and on this score nobody had ever been deprived of enjoying personal freedom and also getting any office of respect in the government. So to say that if a political process will be led by the Indian National Congress, or for that matter any other political outfit which will have people from all walks of life and all religions, would become automatically discriminatory towards any particular community, tantamounts to denying the historical reality of this country. So the two-nation theory, which believed that there is nothing common between the Hindus and the Muslims, was actually an illegitimate argument. If we look at India's history from the rise and growth of communalism in the early years of 20th century till date, we will find that religion has never proved itself to be a glue which would keep people united. If it were so, then with the benefit of recent events which we have all been witness to, we can say that Pakistan would not have been divided further. Now that it has happened, so it has legitimized the doubt which most people had even at that point of time, that religion should not become a political basis for the partition of India.
So, sir, we understood previously just before this question about the Viceroy Committee and the two-nation theory. So, what was the subsequent development further on?
Because of the objections, let me point out this, because of the objections of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the Wavell plan was shelved. Thereafter, as we all know, the Second World War came to an end. Following this war, in an unlikely way, the party which led the country to the war could not come back to power. In the general election that was held in Great Britain, it was the Labour Party led by Clement Attlee which came to office. So in 1945, this government led by Clement Attlee decided that there should be a general election held in India as well. Students of Indian history should recollect that the last time a general election which had been held in India was in 1936-37. So there was a long gap because the popularly elected governments of that time had resigned quickly. So therefore, for Clement Attlee, in order to see the crystallization of a public opinion and also to strategize as to how the Indian question revolving around India's independence can be resolved, he wanted popular governments. That's why a general election was to be held. This general election was held in December 1945.
Okay.
So the World War II came to an end in May 1945. The general election was held in India in December 1945. In the general election, the Indian National Congress had a very impressive victory in the Central Executive Council or the Central Legislative Assembly rather. The Muslim League could not have that kind of an impressive victory. In two provinces, however, the Muslim League had a majority. One was Bengal and the other one was Sindh. So it sort of gave some kind of potence for the events that would happen in subsequent times. And the most interesting thing here is, for a student of history, in the northwest frontier province, which is in Pakistan today, the Muslim League could win only 17 seats and the Congress 30. So this also put paid, in a manner of speaking, to the two-nation theory, which was being espoused by the Muslim League and Muhammad Ali Jinnah so vociferously. If the Muslims were to be led solely by the Muslim League, why then, in an overwhelmingly Muslim majority province, that was northwest frontier province, the Muslim League could win only 17? I mean, a little more than half of what the Congress could win. Yeah. In Punjab, which is another contentious state at the time, also the Muslim League could not win the election, though there was a coalition government. This coalition government was formed by the Congress, the Akalis. So I am emphasizing Akalis, and also the Unionists. So these were the three political formations which came together to form the popular government in Punjab.
Right.
Yes.
So you just talked about the formation of popular three governments. So what happened next? Because we have read about the cabinet mission later on. So if you could explain about it.
Yes. Generally, one would like to think that with this popular government, things would somehow settle. But you know, the pressure on the British government back in Great Britain was increasing by the day.
Right.
It happened particularly because of one incident that shook the morale, as it were, of the government there. This was the mutiny of the non-commissioned officers and also the sailors who belonged to the Royal Indian Navy. Before this, we had seen how formations of Indian Army, which had been left behind in the East, had constituted themselves into Azad Hind Fauj, or the Indian National Army, and they had marched relentlessly towards the northeastern part of India. So now it was the time of the naval, as they are called, ratings. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel played a major role in somehow putting an end to this mutiny. So that also speaks for how the nationalist leadership in India at the time was thinking about India's future. It was not thought appropriate that people in uniform, whether they be Indians or Britons, should rise in revolt. That they should be apolitical, that there were people who could lead India's struggle for independence and achieve it. So this is the significance of the Sardar's role in that. The second thing is that apart from the ratings mutiny, there were also widespread agitations and revolts in Bombay, which all culminated in putting enormous pressure on the British government back in Britain.
Right.
And therefore, what happened next was the Attlee government decided to send a commission of 3 British cabinet ministers to India. So this is well known as the cabinet mission.
Right.
So the members of this mission were Pethick Lawrence, Stafford Cripps and A.V. Alexander. They came to India in March 1946. For 3 months they held parleys with the members of the Viceroy's Executive Council, provincial governments and assemblies, and also with the princely states. Somehow there could not be any agreement on what the commission was trying to deliberate upon. Therefore, the commission gave its own report after 3 months.
So we are just running out of time.
Yes.
So just briefly tell us.
Yes. So the main report, the main points of the cabinet mission report was that India should not be partitioned, number 1. Number 2, the demand for a separate Pakistan thus obviously gets rejected. Number 2, that there has to be a union of India, and the provinces will have multiple powers. The powers of the provinces and the central government will be listed. The princely states can enjoy all powers other than the ones which they will choose to hand over to the union government. And the provinces will be categorized as category A, category B, category C. This was done, this categorization, in order to identify the Muslim majority states, so that somehow a grain of the coming Pakistan was also retained in the cabinet commission. So was this report accepted? The Indian National Congress agreed to the proposal of a constituent assembly, but the Muslim League called for a direct action, which happened in August 1946.
Right.
And
So
on account of this direct action, mayhem happened, lot of people, and as I said, the scar is still unhealed. So after that, a constituent assembly was also constituted under the leadership, under the presidentship of Dr. Rajendra Prasad, but the Muslim League did not participate in it. The communal violence continued, and then came Lord Mountbatten. He came to India and then proposed a plan. So that is the June 3rd plan. According to it, partition as a fait accompli was accepted by the Indian National Congress. An interim government was also constituted in the meantime with Jawaharlal Nehru as its Prime Minister. So thereafter, what happened is an obvious process leading towards the partition of the country.
right.
And Indians and Pakistanis woke up to a divided independence on 15th August 1947.
1947. So we very well understood today about the history of partition, and if you have any further query or the question related to our today's episode, then you can dial into our toll-free number or can drop an email to us. Thank you so much, Professor Mandal.
Thank you.
So till then, take care and keep watching Kishore Manch.